Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome composers Thomas and Julia Newman, who join us to talk about their work on Monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story. Thomas and Julia will talk us through what it was like working together and composing for a show based on real-life events. Please be warned there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Thomas and Julia. Hi, Julia and Thomas. Thank you for joining me today.
It's our pleasure to be here.
Truly.
I'm excited to sit down and talk to you guys about Monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story, which you guys have recently received an Emmy nomination for. How have you found the reception to the show and the sort of awards love to it all?
I think that we were surprised and delighted about people's reaction to the show. Obviously, we knew that going into it, it was a complicated subject matter that dealt with real people. I think one of the first things you said to me when we started, we were sitting in your studio and you said, "Do you understand that this is about real people?"
Right. And so the issue is how could we write music that respected the fact that this all had actually happened and try earnestly not to color it in any false way or to lead to any kind of, dramatic conclusions.
And I think kind of as the young person on the team, I appreciated my dad sitting down and asking me that question so bluntly. Because when you're young, you just are looking for the next opportunity to prove yourself and to have an opportunity to take that step back and appreciate the weight of the story that you were contributing to telling, I think was an important thing.
But that's a really interesting point of view in terms of like finding out, like, when you go to a starting point, is that, this is about real things that's happened, you're dealing with real people and all the sort of consequences that go with it. And I think with something like this show, where unfortunately, like as audience, unfortunately and unfortunately, should I say, as audience members, we've kind of become obsessed with true crime and seeing it in like watching it in like a vicarious way. So you're kind of like, oh my gosh, like I need to watch it. I don't want to watch this because it's horrible, but then also I want to watch it. And it's a really weird way of like audience like taking in what's happened. But then you learn things that come along the way. And I think with, especially like with the soundtrack, where it's so, you guys play with so many different sounds that you can kind of have that sort of detective noir sound to it when they go to like the Bel Air Hotel and that sort of bass line and the some you can feel like the
Alto
bass.
flute. And with the alto flute, just kind
Yeah.
of.
Yeah, and you can kind of feel that sort of, it feels like like you're using it as a way to communicate for the audience that the actor's brain are working towards something, that something's been scheming, and you're kind of like, okay, I'm
We
in with
called it the
this.
scheme theme.
That wasn't that cute
Cute,
though.
no, but we did
We did have a
the
theme that was called it. Yeah, it was a scheme theme.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we have to remember that we're still honoring drama and we're honoring style. And as much as we want to say we don't want to lead anywhere, we kind of have to follow the lead of the directorial lead. And because it is real and horrific, but still quite attractive in just its presentation. Bel Air, Beverly Hills, the kind of landscape of it. It did give us a lot of opportunities to explore different styles of horror, of high comedy, etc.
In the show, you can play with different genres, and you hear that with the way that you can have moments where like the synth is playing, and you can have the singer sort of like harmonizing the sound, but then also when they are being interrogated, and you have the more atmospheric sound. And I guess as an audience member, I quite like that you can pick those things out and those themes out. And I guess with like episodic, you can kind of create a theme for a character and then use it within the 9 episodes themselves. But when you're creating a theme for a character, do you ever think that you might change the tone a little bit or maybe play around with the sound so that you can see what's becoming unraveling with that character? Or do you just leave it not to confuse it too much for the audience?
So we've been asked this question before, and it's interesting because I don't think either of us really think in regards to writing a character theme. I think sometimes you write something, you put it next to picture, and something ends up becoming associated with a character. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Dad, that what you're really trying to do is score drama, and you're trying to look at the architecture of that drama over time. Characters are playing into that architecture, and you're allowing that thematic material to develop, to be refined, to be made more naked, to be more kind of decorated. But that it was never a moment where we said, here's the Lyle and Erik Menendez theme. It was
Right.
more different kind of puzzle pieces and pockets that we use to mosaic
Or
all.
or you learn in retrospect that
Yeah.
something is thematic and maybe doesn't begin that way. Like here's what we want to do here, and we know that's going to work, in hour 3 hour 4 hour 5 or whatever. Mostly because you're kind of working so fast that you really you don't know what will apply. So a lot of what we do, and a lot of what the editorial team would do, would be to take a lot of this material in later episodes and see if it worked, because if it works, you're kind of grateful because there's such limited time. And then if it does work, then you ask yourself, is this a direct repetition, or does it want some variation? Does it want to start in the middle and get back to its thematic material? And you're just kind of doing it just as quickly and as you can, considering the time elements you have.
Do you find that the time elements, obviously there's going to be pressure towards it, but do you feel like those pressures make you feel a little bit more creative and more focused, or is it a case of just trying to keep running on the treadmill so you don't fall off?
I think it's both. I mean, I think the speed of process can oftentimes be helpful because you're thinking less about yourself and more about an act of survival, and then you're kind of putting forth creative ideas at a more rapid pace. I've often said that I think more time is not necessarily better time, but I think it just depends if you can hop on and stay on. And I think for the most part, Julie and I had a lot of fun. I mean, it was a lot of work and a lot of music being turned around quickly, but we always felt creative. We were not. I don't think we were ever pulling our hair and saying, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do." There may have been a couple of times where things were long stretches of movie that needed music under them, but I think it's a learn as you go. I mean, for me, having done this for a long time, you kind of know how to hop on and know that you will have made some progress.
And because I was watching, there's like the new Netflix show about the band stuff. I can't remember what it's called now. I'm just watching it now with my wife, and you see them compose a song in a sort of afternoon and evening, and yeah, it's amazing what people can do. When people are sort of in the zone and doing stuff and bouncing off ideas with one another because they're working in a group. But when you guys are working with one another, how do you guys go about bouncing off ideas and discussing ideas? And again, because there's obviously there's a family element to it because it's father and daughter, but then also experience element, but then also one another you could be di experience in different styles of music as well. How do you go about bouncing off ideas with each other?
I mean, probably any way we can, together, apart, beginning with Julia, coming into a studio and working with her, beginning with me, and vice versa. And I guess mostly trying to be encouraging to one another, just because it was a huge amount of work.
I think that's a really key part of it, is that you want somebody there who, at moments where you're doubting yourself and there's a real sense of vulnerability, to say, no, this is an interesting idea, let's continue to explore it, because you can get lost a bit in the amount of material that's being created. So to have another set of eyes and ears to say, what about this, what about that, I think was an incredibly helpful thing. I think on top of it as well, you know, I feel so lucky to be able to write music with my dad. So I came in, I think, really respecting kind of you as the leader. And then in turn, I think you really gave me an opportunity to exercise my muscles. And what came out of it was really this equal contribution in
Yeah,
creating the score.
a good idea is a good idea. But now bear in mind that Julie and I had worked together before on this other Ryan Murphy project called The Feud,
Feud Capote versus the
The
Swans.
Swans, and I had written the main title, and had absolutely nothing really to do with the body of the dramatic work, the 8 hours which Julia had done. So we've kind of been around each other, and there were projects before that,
Well, I sat behind you for many years after
school?
graduating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was I think a shared procedure really, really helped us because
Right.
we both write in Pro Tools, we know our players, we know everybody was on the same page. So I think had we been coming from totally different camps, that I think would have created a lot of logistical problems that just by the nature of our relationship and me really learning from him over the past however many years was really something we got to skip over and get to the good stuff faster.
Right.
And I was going to say this was one of my later questions, but I'm kind of want to ask this now. What was your favorite idea that you didn't think of that you guys were working on? So if Thomas had an idea, then you kind of ran with it, Julia, or if Julia had an
You wouldn't
idea, how
remember
would you run
now?
with it?
There was a piece that you wrote for when they were at Christmas that was like a more kind of composed piece that you wrote that I
But
loved.
that ended up in I think what happened is they cut it way down editorially.
Yeah,
I think.
that's what always happens.
Yeah.
And then I think the kind of Leslie Abramson stuff
Right.
started with you. And I remember hearing that and being like, oh
Yeah.
my God.
I mean, it's funny because when you're doing it, it's tough to have a reflective kind of gene in your body. You're not saying, "Oh, this is a good idea that was dumped or that didn't make it." It's you're just kind of so in the moment at your best that oftentimes when we're asked questions this way, it's hard to kind of like remember how did we get through hour five? What was hour five? I mean, it's just it's a very fluid process over a period of I don't know 16 weeks or something. Or was it longer than that? It was a long time. So anyway, if we're slightly speechless at some of these specific questions, it's because I often am just because it's tough to remember.
Which I think really does point to what what our process looks like, which is,
Pretty fluid and intuitive
yeah,
more than kind of
intellectual.
yeah. I think we both, or I know I do, just want to get away from describing ideas in words and just sharing music as a way of saying, what do I feel about this? As opposed to here's what I think you should be feeling. But that's kind of the art of good film music, I think, is, does it work? Are you more compelled? Does it make the story more interesting? And therefore the music is meaningful.
Well, I think that was one of the hardest lessons. Like I said, I sat behind my dad in his studio while he worked for many, many years. And I remember one time I showed you a piece that I had written, just, as you do as a young composer, you're trying to compile, different interesting moments of music that, that hopefully point to some well of talent yet unseen. uh, I remember playing this piece for you, and you said, I can really sense the composer in it. And I was so confused. I was so confused by what you meant by that, because at that period of time, you're young and you're looking to prove yourself. And I wanted to say, Dad, of course you sense the composer. Dad, I'm the composer. Don't you see? Isn't it incredible all of the things that I'm doing? Came much later, I think, once you kind of tucker yourself out a little bit and
Right.
kind of the youthful growing pains maybe begin to subside slightly, that the point of film scoring really is not to say, aren't I incredible as a composer? It's to say, it's sort of the abandonment of self in the name of watching music and picture do something together in an amazing way that makes a viewer feel something, that makes the experience of watching a film or piece of television interesting.
Yeah, whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I remember in this thing that there was something you had written as Lyle Menendez was descending the staircase, and I thought it was saying a lot, and I kept trying to
Pull me back.
pull back the ideas
Yes.
because could you hear the stair creak? And yes, there were cool ideas,
Right.
but was it ideas that were in the way of you, the viewer, and the image?
Which to your point about what it means to have a new composer and an experienced composer working together, I think that was some of the most interesting moments, I think, for me getting to work with my dad, because again, that's one of the hardest things is to, when you're young, is to not overwrite. You really want to prove that you have good ideas to offer. And oftentimes that desire overcomes or overwhelms what really needs to be happening on screen and dramatically.
And sometimes it doesn't. If it's an expressionistic kind of movie that really wants an outgoing style. But
that's experience, though. You have that experience to be able to say, like, you were able to identify just as quickly and just as easily when something wants to be outgoing. And I think it's those invisible moments, those conversations, I think, that we had behind the scenes of trying to understand what the nature of a scene is
and what the music should be doing.
Yeah, that is really the meat and potatoes of what it is. It was so exciting to be working with my dad, because that's his expertise playing out in real time. And that for me was so exciting.
I think you make an interesting point about like the music side compared to like visual side, because as you said, it's how what's music's going to make you feel inside, rather than if you watch something or read something, you can kind of stew on it a bit more. You can, I don't know, like your brain probably processes it a lot differently compared to music.
Yeah, it's the temporal arts that whatever you're experiencing, you're experiencing a period of time, and it needs to be digestible in the period that you're seeing it. Plus, if you think about it too, I think I've always been thought about actors and the nuance of performance, and not wanting music to hammer an actor's nuance. So
I think as well, like as an actor, because they perform, but because they're on set, there's no sound design necessarily there. There's no score. It's just them, the camera, um, production design. I wonder what it must feel like to watch that scene back with the sort of like with your score,
you mean
with
as
the sound design.
an actor watching it back?
Yeah, and then being
No,
like,
it's slightly terrifying, right? Like,
yeah, I can imagine you feel like actually I wasn't that great that take, for example, but then you see everybody else add to your character and add to the story. You probably think, oh wow, this is like not how I would imagine in my head, but it's also like this is really good.
it's true. The opposite is he's killed my performance or something. And so yeah, and listen, I think you have to kind of know when, what line that is, and are you over it or behind it, and I think that's what the day-to-day, minute-to-minute is. And obviously we get a lot of input from film people, showrunners, etc., who weigh in and say this is too much, this is not enough, and it's a huge, highly collaborative, art form for sure.
Which I think why it's so fun when it works.
Yeah.
Human cooperation.
Yeah, team play at its best is a great thing to be around, and to think that you are elevating something in a team environment, and everyone's elevating the material. That's really rewarding.
I can imagine it's being very tough as well, because as creatives, you're working with another creative, with a showrunner, Ryan Murphy, but then you're also working with people, for lack of a better term, suits, who kind of don't necessarily might not see it in that creative way. So I can imagine that sometimes you have to stand firm on your decisions, but then other times you kind of have to think, actually, they could be right on this if we scale it back or add a bit
Right,
more.
that's a good point. Is it sometimes it takes an adjustment as opposed to throwing something out, and the fact is taste is undefendable. So if you don't like something that I like, there's a good chance that I'm not going to be able to convince you that it's better than you feel it is. So often the way we address that is just to say, let's rewrite it. And if we want to come back and say, just to remind you of an idea we both really like that you rejected, here it is. And oftentimes, because you've made the effort to have a new idea, they can be more open to your original idea.
So this was, I think, one of the hardest lessons, I think, for me to learn as a young person. When you're in school, you're scoring a bunch of short films. It's really easy to kind of stick your nose up in the air and to think that nobody knows what they're talking about. And then, when I have the opportunity to work on a real show with a real budget that, people will appreciate what it is that I contribute. And I don't think I understood that as my own hubris or arrogance. It was, and
you want to be rewarded for your effort. I think that's something that we learn in school, that we'll make a lot of effort. It will be good or not so good or terrible, but we will be rewarded and graded. And it's just, I think in an environment where you're being paid and so much is on the line, that you end up having to rewrite a lot. It's just a lot more effort and a lot more laps around the field.
But then I think to do it, right? Like it's so easy. I look at my dad, right? It's Thomas Newman. And I watched you take notes. I mean, before we even worked together, I watched you take notes so gracefully and which with such humility, but also a curiosity to see what the validity of the note really was, to kind of see what you would discover on the other side of that. I don't know that I don't know that I could have learned that lesson without having watched you do it first, because you come with such an illustrious career. I think it would be so easy for you to say, I am who I am, and God damn it, you're gonna take the Thomas Newman idea. But I think part of what makes you so good at what you do is that there's a real open-mindedness that you kind of curate throughout. And it's not that you're a doormat. You never say, somebody didn't like this idea, that's it. It's like you were describing, you figure out a way to bring back the idea in a way that's palatable, in a way that,
or just that you give the idea its best shot, and if it
yeah,
doesn't work out, then okay, you've given it your best shot. But oftentimes rewritten areas open new doors, and so you do learn a lot.
yeah.
If you're giving too much pushback, oftentimes it doesn't open a new door to solve other issues later on down the line. So I think you also have to trust that the people you're working with have good ideas, not so good ideas, or whatever. You have to really kind of understand who it is that you're playing to know how far you can get with ideas, with any ideas, I suppose.
And I think that also kind of goes into the art of presentation, which was also something that we encountered, working on this show. It's not merely the idea itself, it's the way that you introduce those ideas. And like you say, it's the shock of the new. You have to understand the vulnerability of the people who you're presenting to, and that they'll have listened to Temp, that they're coming in with their own set of ideas, and
they're freaked that they'll hate what you've done and what they'll say. I mean, the whole other side of it is, imagine you're the director, imagine you're the producer, and you don't like what you hear. Well, then what? How do you reject and then re-encourage someone? I mean, these are all kind of fine kind of people skills that it has nothing to do with music making, but is kind of essential to making progress in a limited period of time.
yeah. And I think if you want to do this job, you have to find the path forward.
Yeah, period.
Yeah, you have to make progress no matter what. What did you used to say to me? Progress on all fronts at all times.
I didn't say it, but I like it.
I think that could be
I
like in
think
your
I
new
said
studio.
finite progress.
So that's what it was.
Yeah, fine. Just moving forward a little bit is better than standing still.
I think I'll say that's my wife, sorry, next time she asks me to do the dishes or something, and I'll take my time.
Works
But
in all environments, trust me.
but it's important as well, as like as you're saying, that if you're working with someone that might not like what you've done, and as a director or showrunner, I guess it comes down to the sort of what your people management skills like, because I'm
Well,
not
there's
sure.
two though. There's two. I mean, that's it's the measure of leadership, right? Which is I need leadership from my end, but so do they in terms of re-engaging me and encouraging. I mean, you really, I mean, as we encourage our players, you don't want to just be a grump when you're in a creative environment. You want to be someone who's trying to pull great things out of other people, and you would hope that would be true, from the people that we are hired to work with.
Yeah, and it's also understanding what sort of person somebody is, if they need an arm around them, or if sometimes you could just say, give them a kick up the backside and they'll go do it. It's very, it's such a fine line, because sometimes if you get it wrong with the wrong person, then it's just like, well, I don't
Right.
know how I'm gonna pull them back in, but I'll figure something out. Or
Or what they say is different than what they feel, right? There's all kinds of traps that way. Or what they say, they're not saying well, but I think what they mean is this, and that means that if we do this, then maybe we'll get there, or something, to be abstract.
Yeah, that was we've talked a lot about, there was another project I worked on and somebody wasn't happy with something. You had nothing to do with it. And I remember calling you thinking, oh my God, they hate it. And you said you need to go back and you need to listen to what it is that you've done and actually kind of contend squarely with.
Make sure you're drawing the right conclusions,
Yeah.
because it hurts to be rejected. So sometimes you kind of go harumph inside, but you really, at that point when you're so vulnerable, you need to kind of say, well, okay, well, it's 30% rejection, it's not 80%
And
rejection.
if I strip away kind of these things,
And so, yeah, some of the fixes are easy.
yeah,
They're not.
and they surprise you. Some I
Yeah.
think that's what I've thought is so interesting is that sometimes the fixes really surprise you. The things that should be easy are so hard sometimes, and the things that you think are going to be hard end up really just opening themselves up to really interesting places.
Yeah, but it all hurts.
It hurts so badly.
Well, but then that's, that's how great art is made, right? From sort of pain and pushing through it all. I just want to pick up on a point that you mentioned before about there was a bit when one of the brothers was walking down the stairs and you're saying about like the creaking of the stairs, and it kind of got my brain thinking as well. As composers, how do you guys work with the sound team so that you're not overshadowing one another, you're working in tandem, but then also because I can imagine there's a bit of a split between the two in terms of camps of like who kind of wants to have their
Moment.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is that no matter how much you want to try to collaborate with the sound team, it's kind of impossible. You're on two separate tracks. You're going to meet up at a dubbing stage. Everyone has to be prepared and or over prepared. And so it all kind of comes down to that moment. And that's where you hope leadership comes in terms of what's important in the act of Lyle Menendez walking down a staircase. Is it the creepiness of the stair, or is it music giving you kind of some hint of something coming? I mean, and I don't think we would, as composers, would necessarily think it's always got to be the music, because I mean the lack of music is always so compelling, and silence makes the entrance of music so much more compelling. But that typically is not. It's one step. It's one floor above our job, which
Yeah.
is what happens next. As much as you can have conversations, and a director or showrunner could say, well, we think this is more of a sound environment than a musical one. And then you write that way. You say, okay, we know that music can't be saying as much as maybe it could, but that's fine.
As you said, leadership has to come in to discuss what they would want and what works best for the scene. But then I can imagine as well, let's make it really sound design heavy, might not work. Let's bring the score in to maybe change that up and see what sort of works best.
But that happens late in the game, and we're typically done by then. We've mixed, and now it's up to a dubbing mixer, and a showrunner to say, let's take sound out and hear what music is doing, or let's take music out and see what sound is doing. And that's why you want to, on a dubbing stage, to ask a dubbing mixer to say, let's just hear music so we know what we're hearing. Because if you're hearing everything at once, and a lot of sound design can be, have tones and notes to it and things like that. So, okay, a low end, is a low end coming from sound, or is a low end coming from music, or is it doubling up and something's got to give? But that's where you really depend on your experts at, farther down the line than when we finish up.
Having good ears and a vision.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in some environments we get to go down and listen to playbacks, but not on monsters. We turn it over, and it kind of turns into what it is, and then we're on to the next hour.
Because Thomas, you have primarily a film background. What is it like working in episodic rather than a feature length?
It's way different. You'd think it would be the same because it's music and image and drama, and but in the end, I think 9 hours over a huge period of time. I think the first hour is always is the dicey hour, because what is the style? What is the vocabulary? Everyone's slightly nervous, but the minute you kind of get that, then the motor starts to hum a little bit. I think in movies it's shorter, right? It's 2 hours, or less than or more than, and there's, I think, much more exchange, creative exchange. Everyone's busy, I think, in a TV environment, doing, like really getting to the next step.
There's definitely, I feel like, a feeling of desperation that you'll see definitely kind of throughout a TV, scoring a television show
But
versus
desperation exists in movies too.
slightly later.
Yeah, it's a different desperation, and the pace of it is different. It all gets desperate. You start off so hopeful, and then you end up just praying that you'll survive. And it's a survivor's game, and that's a great thing. I mean, it's a great thing to know. It works or it doesn't work. I kind of like that equation. Yes, this is in, or no, it's not, and you've got to rewrite it, and it's obvious to me. And at some point in a movie, the same thing happens. You hope and try, you really want to share material so that you can change things when they're still changeable. But oftentimes, you still have to be fresh enough and open and creative enough to not, feel embittered, and to still be able to, to bring your best effort forward.
Mm. And I guess because we've only got a few minutes left on the timer, I guess with final question, because you guys work together and there seems there's a lot of I can feel your guys' energy like it's very, very vibrant and very radiant. And I guess maybe this is a good way to sort of call it back to like working with people. When you have your whole team in the studio and have other people there and you have other musicians and people playing at the same time and trying to get together with what you've written. How do you go about conducting the score there and sort of communicating the notes on the page to make it the right sound that they're going to create?
Well, I guess it depends on your environment. If you're talking about orchestra, if you're talking about a group of people getting together, yeah, the mindset is utterly different. You do have to step into more of a leadership mode and less into an improvisatory, anything goes mode. Most of Monsters was small ensemble, pretty much two or three players that we worked with at different times typically. And so that was all kind of just trying to lasso things or just rope ideas towards us. But I think it's also a measure of the trust that musicians would have to be open to experimentation or improvisation, or if you've made them nervous enough for them to say just I'll play what's on the page if there's anything on the page. But it is again, it's one of those things you have to judge in the moment. In front of an orchestra, it's a totally different type of environment because you're on a 50-minute hour. So it's a very labor intensive environment when you have an orchestra.
And do you find that because you're on a 50-minute hour, do you find that you kind of have no time for sort of, for lack of a better term, BS, and you kind of want to make sure that everybody's going on what they need to do, but then also you need to make sure that you capture what you have in that timing?
Yeah, I mean, how can you get the best out of what you've got?
But you're quite easygoing from the podium. At least that's what you present. Not to say that you're not incredibly
stressed,
and you're obviously so focused, but I think
you want to be
good mood, good vibes.
Yeah, you want to be a good host.
Yeah.
On the other hand, though, when you're with a lot of players and directors and editors and whomever are sitting in a control room, I think you're much less the listener that you would be if you were on your own because you're navigating this kind of social environment. So it's
like trying to have a deep conversation when you're the host of a party.
That's right. That's a good analogy. Yeah. So so a lot of times you think, you're doing the best you can in this 50-minute hour and you're crossing your fingers. And, when you have a little bit of time to breathe and listen back, you think, oh, wow, we got that, or we didn't quite get that. And what do we do now? So it's all, left of center, right of center, and hopefully some bullseyes. And, take it from there.
And then, Julia, from your experience, when you're working with like a smaller group or an orchestra or more of an orchestral setup, how do you find working between the two and sort of navigating a smaller group and a bigger group?
Well, I think if I've learned anything from you, Dad, it's I think understanding the players who are in front of you and really reading the environment. I mean, the way that you're going to act when a producer or director, you have your suits, behind you, with an orchestra present is going to be incredibly different from how creatively open you are, when it's just you one-on-one. So I think if you've taught me anything, it's to try and get with your players on your own in a creative environment, as
where anything goes.
Yeah, where anything goes as often as possible. Because the moments that you have for creative expression and connection are going to be limited just because of time and budget. So yeah, I mean you definitely have much more experience than I do on the podium.
But it's interesting to hear the sort of the wise old Jedi and the padded one sort of hear about, for lack of a better term, apologies, hopefully. But
Don't take it.
but like hearing that sort of experience and also the difference of it all, because I don't know, it's like I can't like if my dad and I worked together, we wouldn't get along. So it's very like, and that's just us, not because we don't like each other. It's just uh, opposites, and we wouldn't get on very well, and a lot of stress. But it just sounds like it's very great energy with you guys, and obviously there's stress involved in it, but you can feel the energy radiating off about with your answers and how you sort of produced the music for it as well and composed it. Yeah, and yeah, hats off to you guys.
Well, the good news about, I mean, I've never worked with another composer in my career, certainly not over a period of 9 hours. So this was a first for me. And the good news about it is that she could reinvigorate me and I could reinvigorate her. And we did kind of have an energy swap a lot that I think made us.
We earned that over years. I think that's the thing to remember. It's not like we just kind of dropped into this and said, yeah, we'll give it a go. I mean, even though we did, but he had me at his studio improvising when I was in preschool. He'd let me skip school. Haha. And it was a long time coming, and it was a lot of me learning what it meant to, I don't want to say take criticism, but have you observe honestly what you were witnessing and the things that I was creating, and me having an open-mindedness.
I think you can take criticism if you know you have ideas, and that if something's being criticized, it's not everything.
Well,
The
it's not
minute
personal.
Just don't tell Mama Newman about the school skipping, Thomas, and you should be okay. Make sure you get some flowers and just make up to it that way.
oh boy,
But Julia and Thomas, thank you so much for your time today.
total pleasure. Thank
Total
you.
pleasure. Thank you so much for
Monsters,
being there.
the Lyle and Erik Menendez story is streaming now on Netflix. Go out and listen to Julia and Thomas's work. Thank you again, guys.
A pleasure.
Thanks, Robert. Have a great rest of your night.
Thank you very much. You guys take care and bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.